They say nothing good happens after midnight. But sometimes what happens in the silence isn't just unexpected, it's irreversible. This is the moment I cross a line I swore I never would. And everything changed forever. I never thought anything would happen between us. He was just my son's friend, young, confident, and always hanging around like he didn't realize what kind of presence he carried. Or maybe he did. He had this quiet kind of charm, the kind that fills a room without needing to say much. Jesse had been coming around our house for over a year, always by my son Nate's side. College friends bonded over late-night gaming and too much junk food. I thought nothing of it at first. But that night, the night I heard my bedroom door creak open, everything changed. I'd been half asleep, the sheets tangled around my legs, the hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence, and then the sound, soft, slow, my door easing open. I turned, heart pounding, and saw him, Jesse, standing in the dark. His silhouette still, eyes locked on me, his breathing shallow. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, he stepped inside and gently closed the door behind him. I didn't see it coming, and once it started, I couldn't stop it. But to understand that moment, I have to take you back. Back to when everything felt quiet. Too quiet. After my divorce, I told myself the silence was a gift, that the empty rooms meant peace, that the loneliness was freedom. I learned to live with the quiet, the sound of the fridge humming at night, my own footsteps echoing up the stairs, the way sunlight filtered into the living room around 5 p.m., touching nothing but dust and old memories. But ever since Jesse started coming around, that silence changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt full, charged. He wasn't just some kid lounging on our couch. There was something in the way he moved through the house, like he belonged there, or wanted to. His frame lean, lashes long, voice low and warm, always carrying the edge of a smirk like he knew something no one else did. At first, I barely noticed him. Just another college guy with tangled hair and a hoodie draped over his shoulders. But as the visits grew more frequent, I started noticing more. The way his eyes would hold mine a beat too long in the hallway. The slight drop in his voice when he spoke to me directly. The way he watched me one evening from the kitchen doorway while I did dishes. His expression unreadable, sharp, like he was waiting for me to look up. And when I did, he didn't flinch. He just tilted his head, offered that slight smile again, then turned and disappeared upstairs. I told myself I was imagining it. I had to be, because the alternative, the idea that Jesse saw me the way I was beginning to see him, was something I couldn't afford to believe. And yet, the thoughts kept coming. The truth was, it had been years since anyone looked at me like that. If that was what this was, years since I let myself wonder what it would feel like to be seen, really seen. After the divorce, something inside me had shut off. I stopped believing I was desirable or wanted. I stopped believing someone might see me and think, not of who I'd been, but of who I still was. But Jesse kept showing up, and I kept noticing more. The way his shirts would ride up just a bit too high when he stretched, the faint curve of his waist, the soft rasp of his voice in the mornings, still thick with sleep, and the way he wanted the house in nothing but gym shorts, bare skin sun-warmed, casually confident, like it never occurred to him that I might be watching. But I was, and that terrified me. One night, I got home late from work. The living room lights were still on, the TV low. Nate had fallen asleep on the couch, limbs sprawled everywhere, a bowl of popcorn upside down on the carpet. And there was Jesse, on the other end of the sectional, shirtless, a blanket draped low on his hips, one arm tucked behind his head. I froze in the doorway. His chest rose and fell slowly, maybe asleep, maybe not. But his lips were parted, the muscles of his stomach visible in the glow of the screen. My gaze lingered longer than it should have. I told myself I was just checking on him, that I was making sure he was comfortable. That was a lie I could almost believe. Then his eyes opened. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched me, not surprised, not embarrassed, just calm, steady. I stood there, caught in my own home, the air between us humming with something unspoken. And I knew in that moment that he knew. Something passed between us, silent, invisible, but undeniable. I muttered something about turning off the TV and fled upstairs, fast, before I did something I'd never be able to take back. But sleep didn't come that night. I stared at the ceiling for hours, every shift of the sheets loud in the stillness. I couldn't stop replaying that moment. That look, his eyes. I told myself I imagined it, but I hadn't. And worse, I didn't want it to stop. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I asked if they wanted pancakes. I kept my voice steady. I didn't dare meet Jesse's eyes. But then he walked into the kitchen, shirtless again, hair messy from sleep, eyes still a little heavy. His presence hit me like a weight. He moved so easily in the house, barefoot, relaxed, like he'd always lived there, like the walls themselves shifted around him. Nate was still upstairs, probably passed out. Jesse offered a quiet morning as he passed me to grab a glass of water. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked, my voice too calm. He shrugged, then leaned against the counter with that familiar smirk. "Yeah, couch isn't bad." I turned back to the stove, let the silence stretch. I could feel him behind me, his gaze steady and unflinching, like he was trying to read me. Not like a boy watching his friend's father, but like a man seeing someone he was drawn to. When Nate finally stumbled downstairs, groggy and yawning, the tension broke just enough to breathe again. We ate breakfast like nothing had happened, like I hadn't nearly crossed a line that had haunted me all night. But I had, and I wasn't sure I could ever come back from it. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows in warm streaks, softening the quiet tension that hung between us. The house felt oddly still for a weekend, but in the dining room, Eli sat across from me with casual ease, twirling his fork between his fingers. Every now and then, I caught him watching me, half-hidden glances over the rim of his glass, eyes lingering for a second too long. We were planning a road trip, or at least they were. Nay had been excited about it all morning, talking nonstop about playlists and snacks. But now, as I sat across from Eli, my son upstairs doing who knows what, the silence felt thicker than it should have. Later that day, I wandered into the living room looking for my charger. Eli was alone on the couch, scrolling through his phone. His legs were sprawled comfortably across the cushions, and he looked up when I entered. "Your son's in the shower," he said, his voice easy. I gave a small nod, pretending to rummage near the coffee table for something I didn't really need. My back was turned when he spoke again. "You always is tense." The question stopped me. I froze, unsure whether to laugh or take it seriously. "What do you mean?" I asked, turning toward him slowly. He put his phone down, leaned back into the cushions, one arm draped casually across the back of the couch. He didn't look guarded, just curious. "I don't know," he said. "You act like you're holding your breath when I'm around." My heart kicked a little harder in my chest. "I'm not." "You sure?" His tone was quiet, but it carried weight. There was a pause, a dangerous one, the kind that stretches longer than it should and says too much. I could feel the air shift between us, thick with something unspoken. "I just try to give you space," I said eventually. He looked at me a moment longer, like he wanted to respond, but the words never came. Instead, he offered a faint, unreadable smile and nodded. "That's fair." I left the room quickly, before I could say something I'd regret. That night, the boys stayed up watching movies again. I could hear their laughter, muffled explosions, and voices from the action film vibrating faintly through the walls. Around midnight, I passed by the room and peeked in. Nate was out cold, slumped against the couch with the controller still in his hand, breathing slow and even. But Eli wasn't asleep. He was upright, partially reclined with a blanket pulled to his waist. His eyes were fixed on the screen, but they weren't watching. He turned his head slowly when he noticed me in the doorway. We said nothing. I stood there for a beat too long, throat dry, unsure if I was about to speak or retreat. "You're still up?" I said finally, my voice quiet. He shrugged. "Wasn't tired yet." I nodded. "All right, good night." I turned to leave. "Hey, Mr. Hale." His voice stopped me in place. Softer now, without any of the usual teasing in it. I glanced over my shoulder. You don't have to keep pretending you don't see it. My chest felt hollow. My breath left me in a slow exhale. I don't know what you mean, I replied, even though we both knew I did. He nodded once, like he expected that answer, like he almost believed it, but not quite. He pulled the blanket higher and turned his attention back to the TV. The moment passed, or maybe he let it. I walked away in silence, hands clenched tight at my sides. That night, I lay in bed long after the house went quiet. The lights were off, the room dark, the sheets cool against my skin, but my heart wouldn't settle. Sometime past 2 a.m., I heard a floorboard creak, a single step in the hallway, slow, measured, then stillness, right outside my door. I didn't move, I didn't speak, and whoever it was, who I knew it was, never knocked. After a minute, the footsteps faded, the silence returned, but I was already wide awake, staring into the darkness, and wondering what would have happened if I'd gotten up, if I'd opened the door, if we were already too close to something neither of us could take back. That was the beginning of everything. The morning came too bright. Sunlight poured through the blinds, merciless in its clarity, as if the universe had no regard for the quiet storm building in my chest. I stood in the kitchen longer than usual, letting the kettle hiss on the stove while I stared out the window. I hadn't slept, not after the hallway, not after the sound of those deliberate steps just beyond the door. And when Eli walked in barefoot, wearing a faded gray t-shirt that barely reached his waist and nothing else but black boxer briefs, I was already tense. He looked half awake, hair a mess, but his eyes? Alert. Morning, he said easily, like it was just another day. He opened the fridge without hesitation, moving like he belonged here. Where's Nate? I asked, trying to focus on the mug in my hands. Still knocked out upstairs, he replied, grabbing a bottle of water. He was up all night gaming. I nodded and turned back to the counter, busy myself with pouring tea. But I felt it again, the way the air shifted when he was too close. The warmth of him behind me, the small space between us that didn't feel small enough. You don't talk much when we're alone, he said. I glanced over my shoulder, forcing my tone steady. I talk plenty. He smirked, lifting the bottle to his lips. Just not to me. I looked at him, really looked, and regretted it instantly. His shirt hung off one shoulder, revealing the smooth curve of his collarbone. His lips were wet from bottle, his eyes locked with mine. Maybe I'm just trying to be careful, I said. Why? He asked. No sarcasm, just stillness. The quiet that followed was suffocating. I stepped past him to the sink, avoiding his gaze, because I'm not a fool. He leaned back against the counter. You think this is a game to me? I don't know what it is, I said, still not facing him. He didn't answer right away. Just let the silence expand until I couldn't bear it. When I finally turned around, he was already watching me. This time, no hesitation. You keep staring at me, he said, voice softer now. You don't even realize when you do it. My throat tightened. You're not making this easy. I'm not trying to. I let out a shaky breath, my pulse thundering. I'm twice your age, I said. So? His voice was barely a whisper. You think I care about that? You should, I snapped. You should care about all of this, what it means. He stepped forward then, slow, measured, until there was barely a foot between us. You care enough for both of us, he said quietly, and I hated how right he was. I backed away before I could do something reckless. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the counter, like it might anchor me in place. Go put on some damn clothes, I said. He didn't flinch. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. Just that calm, unreadable look of his. The kind of look that made me feel like he already knew I wouldn't hold out forever. Then he turned and walked out the kitchen, the smooth curve of his back disappearing down the hallway. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. My knuckles had gone white. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Nate eventually woke up, groggy and completely unaware of the storm brewing in me. The two of them, my son and Eli, spent the afternoon on the couch, watching TV and eating leftovers. I stayed in the background, trying to act like a functioning adult, like a responsible parent. Like I hadn't nearly grabbed Eli by the waist and kissed the defiance off his face that morning. But I had, and every glance he threw my way told me he knew it. By evening, I couldn't sit still. I stepped out onto the porch just to breathe, the sun sinking behind the trees in a wash of gold. I leaned on the railing, my chest tight, my heart even tighter. The door creaked open behind me. I didn't need to turn. I felt him. He stepped up beside me, sipping from a glass of soda like nothing had happened, like we hadn't been circling each other like wolves all day. "You okay?" he asked after a quiet moment. I nodded. "I just need space." He didn't answer right away. I could hear him swallow, the glass clicking softly as he sat on the railing. Then calmly, he said, "Do you want me to stop?" The question hit like a gut punch. I turned to look at him, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted. "I don't know." He studied the horizon, his expression unreadable. "You're afraid I'll break something," he said. "But maybe it's already cracked. Maybe it's been that way since before I showed up." I couldn't argue with that, so I didn't. That night, the house was still. Nate had gone to bed early, exhausted from a day of doing nothing. I wandered the hallway in silence, the hum of the refrigerator and the distant creak of the floorboards the only sounds. As I passed the guest room, I saw the door slightly ajar. The light was off, but I could see the faint outline of Eli lying in bed, one arm slung over his eyes, shirtless again, the sheet resting low across his hips. I should have kept walking, but I stood there longer than I should have, just watching. And maybe, just maybe, he saw me too. But I turned away, heart pounding. Something was coming. I could feel it pressing on the edges of me like a wave about to break. And I wasn't ready for what would happen when it did. I woke to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. The clock read past midnight. The hallway light spilled in faintly, enough to silhouette the figure in the doorway. It was him. "Eli." And then I heard the soft click of the lock. I didn't move. My breath caught as I watched him take one quiet step after another. He was barefoot, wearing only a pair of low-slung sweats. No shirt, no pretense. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice low, raw from sleep. He didn't answer at first. He stopped beside the bed and looked down at me like he wasn't sure I was real. Then softly, he said, "You already know." I swallowed. "I can't." "You already did," he said. Then, slowly, he climbed onto the bed, not touching, just hovering above me like a question I didn't want to answer. My body was tense beneath him, every muscle pulled tight. I should have pushed him away. I should have said something that made this stop. But I didn't, because I wanted him. I had wanted him for weeks, maybe longer. And now he was here, his breath on my face, his hands planted on either side of me, waiting, not forcing, just waiting. I reached up, my fingers brushing the curve of his waist, the bare skin warm beneath my touch. He shivered. "I thought about this all day," he whispered. "Every time you looked at me like you were mad, I knew it wasn't anger. Not really." His lips brushed my jaw, soft at first, like he was waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. When he kissed me, really kissed me, it was like something unraveled. Everything I'd been holding in crashed all at once. It wasn't neat or planned. It was messy and desperate and quiet, a slow burning fire that had finally found air. We didn't say much after that. Words felt too small, too breakable. I pulled him closer, one hand on the back of his neck, the other on his shoulder. He sank into me like he belonged there, like this had been building between us since the moment he first stepped into my kitchen barefoot and defiant. There were no promises, no labels, just a rhythm of breath and heartbeats and skin. He pressed his forehead to mine, and I felt his fingers tighten in the fabric of my shirt like he needed to hold on to something. So I let him. I let all of it happen, the closeness, the trembling honesty of it. Later, when we lay still in the dark, the silence wasn't awkward. It felt earned, like the pause at the end of the song. He whispered my name once, just once, like it meant something. And it did. I turned my head to look at him, eyes adjusting to the dim light. "What are we doing?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. but it feels like we already started. I closed my eyes. I didn't know where this was going. All I knew was that it had already gone too far to pretend it hadn't. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I wanted to turn back. Some mornings change everything, not because of what was said, but because of what was left unspoken and who was still lying next to you. I woke to the sound of birdsong and the low creak of the ceiling fan spinning overhead. For a split second, it felt like just another quiet morning. But then I felt the weight of a body pressed gently against mine, a warm arm slung across my waist, a steady breath brushing the side of my chest. Eli. He hadn't left. His leg was tangled with mine, and his face was tucked into my shoulder like it belonged there. Like this wasn't something we'd spent days avoiding, pretending, suppressing. But now there was no pretending. Not after last night. Not after the line we crossed. My heart started racing again, not with desire this time, but with guilt and confusion. I stared at the ceiling, trying to remember how to breathe normally. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not like this. You're tense, Eli mumbled against my skin, voice low and still thick with sleep. You broke into my room in the middle of the night. I said quietly, a dry edge to my tone. What do you expect? He chuckled softly, his fingers absently drawing patterns on my stomach. Didn't hear you complaining last night. I turned to glare at him, but the smirk on his face nearly made me forget what I was about to say. He looked so unbothered, like the weight I was carrying didn't touch him. You should go before Nate wakes up, I said. He didn't move, just looked at me for a beat longer. Do you want me to? That stopped me cold. My throat tightened. I looked at him, really looked. The quiet way he was watching me, waiting for an answer I didn't want to give. He was still half under the sheets, one hand resting over my heart like it belonged there. I didn't want him to go. No, I said finally, barely louder than a whisper. I don't. He leaned in and kissed the corner of my jaw, slow and warm, not rushed like last night, but deliberate. I cupped the back of his neck and pulled him closer, his lips brushing mine again. It wasn't about lust this time. It was something else, something quieter, deeper, but that didn't make it any easier. His hand slid up my chest, fingers spreading over my heart, like he was trying to memorize the rhythm of it. And maybe he was, because neither of us knew how many more moments like this we'd have. Or if we should have had them at all. You're dangerous, I whispered against his lips. I've been called worse, he replied, smile ghosting across his face. We stayed like that, wrapped in stillness, until a sound from the hallway cut through the silence, the buzz of a phone on a wooden table. Eli sat up quickly, alert. That's him, he said, eyes wide. He threw the blankets off and scrambled for his clothes, panic rising behind his movements. I watched him, the same boy who had just kissed me like I meant something, now moving like a teenager caught sneaking out. You'll be fine, I said, trying to sound calm even though my stomach was in knots. He pulled on his hoodie, fingers fumbling with the zipper. You think he knows? Not yet. Eli paused by the bed. For a second, I thought he'd just bolt out. But then he leaned down, cupped my face in both hands, and kissed me again, slower this time. Like he didn't want to go. I'll come back later, he whispered. And then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was left alone. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. The scent of him still clung to the sheets. The silence roared louder than anything. Later that day, we sat at the kitchen table like nothing had happened. Nate talked about car troubles and some concert he wanted to see next month. Eli sat across from me, barely looking up, but under the table, his foot brushed against mine, and stayed there. I froze. He didn't. He just kept talking with Nate, like it was a normal afternoon. My fork hovered midair, and I couldn't hear a word they were saying. Everything felt too loud and too quiet at the same time. Eventually, I excused myself. In the hallway, I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes, fists clenched. The space between us might have been inches, but the distance felt like a mile. And the worst part? This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I didn't see Eli for 2 days after that. Nate went back to campus early for a group project, and the house returned to its usual quiet. The kind of quiet that was supposed to feel like peace. But instead, it just felt like absence. Every room reminded me of him. The hallway where his foot had touched mine. The bathroom mirror where faint marks had started to fade from my throat. I'd thought about covering them. I didn't. Part of me hoped Eli wouldn't come back, that we could pretend none of it ever happened. But a louder part of me, the part one didn't want to admit existed, waited for the sound of the front door. And then, on Friday night, it came. I was in the kitchen, pretending to clean, when I heard the door shut gently behind him. I didn't turn around at first. I just listened to the soft shuffle of footsteps. Then I looked up. Eli stood in the doorway, a hoodie pulled over his head, backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked like he was just stopping by, like this wasn't a risk. But his eyes gave him away. There was something darker in them, something restless. "I shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. "Then why are you?" His throat bobbed with the answer. He didn't give. He looked at me for a long moment, then dropped his bag by the counter and crossed the room slowly. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," he admitted. I didn't move. My hands rested on the edge of the sink, gripping the cold ceramic like it could anchor me. "This doesn't make sense," I whispered. "No," he said, "it doesn't, but I'm still here." And so was I. I didn't stop him when he stepped closer. I didn't stop him when he reached for my hand. And I didn't stop myself from holding on. Not yet. Some people leave quietly, but their absence stays louder than anything they ever said. The door clicked shut behind him, and just like that, I was alone again. But not really. His presence was still here, even after he was gone. The air held him like a ghost, warm, weightless, and everywhere. I stayed on the kitchen floor for a long time, my back pressed against the cabinet, my knees drawn up like I was trying to hold something in. But all I could feel was the ache. Not regret, not shame, just that heavy, hollow ache you feel when something real slips through your fingers before you even know how to hold it. I kept replaying his last look, the way he glanced back before walking out. His eyes didn't carry guilt, just clarity, like he knew what this was and still didn't run from it. And that made it worse. Or better. I didn't know yet. Time passed strangely after that. Minutes stretched like hours. Every small sound, the house creaking, the refrigerator humming, even my own breathing, felt like it was filling the silence he left behind. I eventually stood up, but the kitchen didn't feel like mine anymore. Everything had shifted. The morning came, pale and quiet, slipping through the blinds like it didn't want to be noticed. I woke up tangled in my sheets, still wearing yesterday's clothes. My mouth was dry, my thoughts louder than they should be, and all I could think about was his voice, the way it cracked when he said, "This isn't just a mistake for me." The truth was, it hadn't felt like a mistake for me either. If anything, it felt like something I'd been quietly waiting for, without knowing it. I wandered through the house like I was searching for him in the folds of memory. My fingertips dragged along doorknobs, light switches, the edges of framed photos on the wall. It was like I was looking for fingerprints I knew wouldn't be there. Then I found the guest room door slightly open. The sheets on the bed were twisted, like he'd slept restlessly. A pillow had fallen to the floor, and on the chair, slung casually, like he hadn't thought twice about it, was his hoodie. Gray, soft, worn in all the right places, unmistakably his. I stood in the doorway, staring at it, feeling something clench in my chest. Did he forget it, or leave it on purpose? I didn't know, and maybe I didn't want to. I walked in, picked it up, and pressed it to my face. It smelled like him, not just soap and cologne, but that strange, impossible-to-describe scent that clings to someone you've memorized too quickly. It smelled like late nights and long pauses, like something that mattered. I held it for longer than I should have, then finally folded it gently and set it on the bed. By late afternoon, I had convinced myself I wouldn't hear from him. And then my phone buzzed. One message. I don't know how to go back to pretending. I froze. The words hit something in me that had been wound tight for hours. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. And then I typed the only two words that felt true. Then don't. I didn't send anything else. And he didn't reply, not right away. I sat on the couch, hoodie in my lap, waiting for a sound that didn't come. Maybe he was gone for good. Maybe the message was his way of saying goodbye without saying goodbye. Or maybe that night, as I walked past the guest room again, I stopped in my tracks. The hoodie was gone. My heart skipped. Not because I'd heard anything. Not because he said he was coming back. But because he had. I found him in the kitchen, barefoot, hoodie on, hair a little messy like he'd been running his hands through it. He didn't look up at first. Just sat there at the table, staring at the floor like the tiles might offer him a script. He didn't need one. When he finally looked up, his eyes met mine, and everything that hadn't been said rushed between us in silence. I thought maybe, he started, voice barely above a whisper. This was a mistake. There was a pause. But it doesn't feel like one. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That's because it isn't, I said. He stood slowly, cautious but not afraid. His expression was soft, unsure, like he was stepping into something delicate, like one wrong word might shatter it. So what do we do now, he asked. I didn't have the answer. And for once, that felt okay. I walked to him, close enough that I could see the tiny crease between his eyebrows, the way his lips parted like he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. We stopped pretending. I said, and we see where this goes. He smiled, not wide, not sure, but enough. Enough to say, I'm here. I'm trying. We didn't fill the silence after that. We didn't need to. We just sat again on the kitchen floor, our shoulders touching, our knees brushing now, and then like tiny reminders that we were still there. Still real. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was full of questions we weren't ready to ask. Full of answers we didn't need yet. Full of whatever was slowly growing between us like a seed in soft soil. Hope, fear, possibility. Whatever this was, whatever might become, it wasn't just a moment. It wasn't a fleeting spark that would fade in the daylight. It was something deeper. Something dangerous, maybe, but honest. And I think we both knew it. Maybe we'd get it wrong. Maybe the world wouldn't understand. Maybe the weight of it would become too much and we'd break apart under it. But maybe we wouldn't. Maybe we'd surprise ourselves. Maybe in all the mess of it, we'd find something worth holding on to. The night settled around us slowly, like a blanket we hadn't asked for, but welcomed anyway. Outside, the world went on spinning. Unaware, unchanged. But inside that quiet kitchen, something had shifted, and though the future felt like a room with the lights turned off, neither of us moved to leave, because sometimes all you need is someone who stays. He stayed, and so did I. If you've ever felt something that defied logic but made your heart beat louder, drop a speech balloon in the comments. Let's talk. And if you thought this story was powerful, wait until you hear what's coming next. A new story, a new kind of connection. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Because sometimes the ones who change us the most are the ones we never saw coming.